And bam, and yes, Terrassol Pix. I see a little remark over in the chat. I should probably, I could put the chat up here. How do I want to do that? This is the first time I've streamed in my life, let me tell you. This is the first time. I don't know exactly what I want to do with this show. This episode is very much a okay, why is it when I drag... Oh, I can only move chat around the dashboard. Pop out chat. Where's that option? Blah, 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 blah. Pop out. Aha! There it is. And let's put that onto the screen. Window capture? Let's name this Twitch chat. Okay. This one? Yes. Oh boy, let me make that better. This might work. Oh, that's too small. It's hard to tell because my OBS is kind of small. I don't want to take up too much space though, and you have the Radix thing down there. Let's just do that. I don't think anything important will pop up in that corner. So, welcome to the first episode of History 101. And stream died. What? Never mind. Oh, okay then. I was about to bomb Jerusalem. So, welcome to the first live streamed episode of History 101 with Dr. Radix. Now, this being the first episode, and the subject matter we have is actually pretty, I don't want to say short, but it's not like, full scale. You don't have to really, like, get into it. Like, it's a fairly simple story. Well, it's not, it's a plot to overthrow a government by civilians of another country. So maybe it's not that simple. But I want to get into some background about this series beforehand. I like history and I like education. One of the jobs I was aiming for a while was to be a high school history teacher. And so it's just in my nature to learn history, to figure out how to present it to an audience, that sort of stuff. I like teaching, I like history, and then boom, they go together. Tell me about the Klan, baby. We'll get to the Klan. But in the Discord server, link in the description, I'm not sure if I'm even going to bother this will be re-uploaded onto Radix repository. I'm not sure if I bother putting links in the description to those channel videos. But, where was I? But, yeah, I wrote essays in the Discord server. Just sort of informal history essays on events from history. And that was really well received, but ultimately I didn't have enough time to write a lot more stuff. A lot of the stuff I wanted to. I haven't really spoken English in a long while, so forgive me if I mess up a little bit. Where was I? So, I figured that I'm still good with, like, finding information. And I figured, hey, I can just, it's so quiet. I usually have music on my streams. I don't know if I want to. Alright, chat, tell me. One in the chat if you want me to put up the lo-fi music I always have at the back of, like, every other stream I have. Or, like, two if you're fine how it is. But, because I still collected information, still like teaching people history, I figured maybe I can try live streaming this. History 101 with Dr. Radix. After all, I did one with Twisted, where I taught Japanese internment during World War II, and that's... I rewatched that stream like yesterday. 3 heavy metal. That's a 10. I'll put on the lo-fi. The lo-fi, as the cool boys say. But yeah, the Twisted Japanese internment stream went very well. I really like that. So I figured, let's give this a try. Now, in the Discord server, I gave people the option of whether or not I wanted to, if you wanted a... Let me make sure that's not too loud. I should make a way for you guys to request music, but I'm not, super streamer Twisted Ambition. Hopefully that's not too loud. Let's see. I want to do something like just like a slideshow of cool history facts that you might not know this. That you might not know in the when it's just dead silence and it says live at like 8:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I might like make that a little bit more interesting to sit in. But let's see. My mind is everywhere. This is bad. So I decided to stream this. I gave the Discord the option of whether or not you would want a co-host or someone I'm teaching in this. And most people don't want me to be teaching someone, in my voice chat as I'm doing this. Frankly, I think I would work better with someone. I think like Twisted Ambition being there and his learning from the session, that was what really made that stream good. But I'm going to give this a shot at just me in the void with the chat. I don't expect chat to be here all the time, because that's just how streams work. You keep streaming and streaming and streaming, and then like it becomes less of a special event. And you can catch it on Radix repository anyway. That's what I would probably do if I wasn't me. But yeah. What else I want to say? I know that this isn't necessarily an ideal time, 8:00 p.m. on Thursday. I've noticed that a lot of people like to do stuff on Thursday. Like, clubs, meetings, whatever. Oh, we'll meet on Thursday afternoon. Nobody does stuff on Thursday. They do stuff on the weekends, maybe Monday and Tuesday. But when everyone has the philosophy that we're going to do something on Thursday, then all of a sudden Thursdays become really cramped. But whatever. Anything else I want to say? This is my first real attempt at this, so forgive. This is going to be bumpy. That's how I'm going to say. This is going to be very bumpy. I don't think there's any other things I need to talk about, so I guess I'll just try to. I'll pull a Philip DeFranco and let's just jump right into this. Operation Red Dog. So guys, it's the 80s. Super Mario Bros. Actually, it's like 1979. The Super Mario Bros. Still hasn't come out. Most of the story is set in the early 80s, but we're starting in 1979. But the 80s are upon us. Music is starting to get that steel drum type, what we would call today, synthwave feel. And it's the hip hop in 1979. America's pissed off that they lost the Vietnam War, etc., etc. But there's turmoil in a little island country called Grenada. And I have a map. Let me see if I can pull that up. Map. Boom. Here's a map of the Caribbean, or Caribbean, whatever you want to say. I don't care. And there's some trouble going on over in Grenada. Grenada is, if you look at like Venezuela, then go up to Trinidad and Tobago, and then up you'll see Grenada. A small island, sort of close to South America. Okay, now this music's getting on my nerves. Okay. Small island, the Caribbean. I've said this already. But there's turmoil there. See, there's a little thing in the 80s/1979 called the Cold War. You have this contest of ideas between American capitalism and Soviet communism. We said sail for Tortugal. Or Tortuga. Yes. But, and Grenada has its own little communist issue. I repeat, Africa by Toto on loop since the music is bothering you. I'm not convinced that Africa by Toto on loop will not bother me. Let's see. Grenada's in turmoil, and communism has risen up in the form of something called the New Jewel Movement, I think it's called. Let me check my notes. Jewel. It's something Jewel. New Jewel Movement. Yeah, I was right. And we have a picture of them. New Jewel Movement. Look at these guys, looking like your average college students. You have one Fidel Castro cosplayer. You have Mr. Black Bob Ross. You got Enrique Sanchez over on his right. It's an interesting ragtag bunch of communists taking over Grenada. Now, America isn't really okay with communism. They're like, oh, communism in my Atlantic Ocean, in my Caribbean Sea, because you have to keep in mind that there's this context of the Monroe Doctrine, where the United States kind of wants control over the entire Western Hemisphere. They don't want any outside force interfering. And they see communism as a Soviet force, therefore a Soviet or a communist uprising in Grenada is bad news. Never mind that they've already lost Cuba to communism several years earlier. Don't catch you commie now. I wish I knew what that meant. So yeah, Cuba's a main... We've already... This is past the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs, etc., etc. But Grenada going communist is not good for the United States. But what does this have to do with the Ku Klux Klan? Did I say clue? The Ku Klux Klan, Radix. I don't understand. Well, in 1979... communists take over Grenada, and their Prime Minister Eric Gary, I think it's pronounced. It's Gary. I have a picture of him somewhere. Gary. Eric Gary. Yeah, it's sort of like that thinking emoji. But, he was thinking too hard, and then the communist was this have a do with a Ku Klux Klan? That's exactly right. But, so we have the thinking emoji, Eric Gary, Prime Minister of Grenada. He's actually left-leaning, but not left enough for the communist. Donald Glover overthrows him, and then he's like, oh no. So he gets, he goes into exile in the United States. He goes to San Diego, I believe. So meanwhile, while there's this rebellion going on in Grenada, you know who really, really hates communism? If you said the Ku Klux Klan, you'd be right. So here we have this dude. What a doofus. I'm sorry. I only give the most unbiased and fair. History 101 with Dr. Radix is a scholarly... it's a scholarly class. I'm accredited by the university. People are flocking. I know your tuition is pretty high to be in this class, but so this dude is a man by the name of... He just looks... Okay, this guy is named Mike Perdue. Mike Perdue is a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And by the way, I want to clarify something here. There's this misconception that the Ku Klux Klan is like one organized organization. Ignore that I just said organized organization. But there's this misconception that the Ku Klux Klan is one force. The Ku Klux Klan is more of like an idea, and then several other people form their own clubs based around the idea, essentially based around the film Birth of a Nation. Really, there's all these different federations of Ku Klux Klans, all of them calling them Ku Klux Klans. They work together. Some of them hate each other. Some Ku Klux Klans have a principle of violence, believing that they need to commit violence against people especially black people. And then some of them do not want to be violent. It's very interesting, the intricacies of the Ku Klux Klan. But Mike Perdue here, the Ku Klux Klan is a state of being. Yeah. But most Ku Klux Klan organizations, I'm going to say KKK from this point on, because Ku Klux Klan is hard for me to say. Too much L's and absences of L's. I don't even know what Ku Klux Klan means. It sounds like some sort of chicken sandwich special. But most KKK organizations have a ban on homosexuals. But that doesn't stop Mr. Mike... I'm dragging the wrong picture. Never mind. I would be dragging Mike Perdue if I had competency. There we go. Mr. Mike Perdue doesn't care about your KKK doesn't allow homosexuals because, surprise, he's a gay. I know you couldn't tell based off of his appearance, but Mike Perdue is very interesting because he's a homosexual man of the Ku Klux Klan. The KKK is worried about the diversity quotas. But Perdue here, I swear I spent half this stream just just roasting this dude. Come on down to get the new Cluck Clue Clan at the new Chick-fil-A. The Freddie Mercury looking MFer isn't gay. Well, he is gay. That's the plot twist. But so yeah, he's sitting in his home in Houston, Texas. He's reading the newspapers and he sees commies are rising up in Grenada. And he's like, we can't have that. So he comes up with this scheme to launch a counter-revolution against Grenada to defeat the communists. He also is like, hey, if I launch this anti-communist counter-revolution on Grenada and defeat Donald Glover, defeat Childish Gambino, maybe Grenada will give me like a section of the island to establish a, quote, Aryan paradise. Because, of course, Grenada would do that. So, he ends up meeting up with Thinking Emoji, Eric Gary, the ousted Prime Minister of Grenada. I like to see the clan wear their hoods into battle. That's fair, yeah, like little Altaïrs. But so, Perdue and Gary meet, and Perdue pretty much tells him, hey, yo, if you give me money... I have so many pictures that aren't showing behind there, and every time I try to click it on OBS, I'm dragging another picture. So I'm not going to do the whole shake photographs to show them talking cliche. So Perdue, let me find the details of the agreement. So Perdue's like, yo, Gary, I see you have this commie problem over in Grenada. Give me money, and then I will launch an invasion of Grenada to restore you to power, and also give me some land to make an Aryan paradise. And Gary says, yeah, sure. Interestingly enough, there's going to be a lot of KKK people working alongside with black people in this little lesson here. It's very interesting. But Gary's like, that sounds good, man. You know, you just go get your army, and I'll be ready to take back power. So Bertu's like, oh yeah, it's a heartwarming story. Yeah. It's inspiring, precisely. So let's see. When I was doing the Japanese internment lesson with Twisted, I was deleting stuff I had already said, but I spent a lot of time on these notes, and I'm very paranoid at deleting stuff. I don't know. I know what I'll do. I'll just make a copy. Because I'm getting caught up looking at my notes and just seeing stuff I've already read. Give me a moment. We've cut out... We're going to have to jump over to the 1970s in a little bit, so maybe I won't start deleting stuff just yet. So, Perdue's like, all right, I've got permission from the ousted Prime Minister of Grenada. This is still 1979. I need to hook up with my good old KKK buddies, and we're gonna make ourselves a little Aryan promised land. So he contacts pretty much who is, I believe, the main KKK boss in town, a man by the name of David Duke, who I'm not sure if he had gotten through his doctorate yet at this point. He might have. I'm not sure. David Duke is probably the most popular Klansman because I think he's like the only one that will like go on news organizations. David Duke, it's interesting. David Duke goes through this whole sort of, I don't want to say redemption arc because it's David Duke, but during this time period, he eventually leaves the KKK because in his view, the KKK was too violent and racist. That's right. The dude who was like the head honcho of the KKK eventually left because, oh man, did you know these KKK guys are like racist? Whoa, that's too far. That's the way he phrases it. I'm not going to say, in my opinion, as to whether or not David Duke is a racist. But David Duke is sort of like the head honcho here. And Mike Perdue's like, yo, Dave, you want to give me some tips on how to take over Grenada? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to introduce you to a few people. And it's like freaking Suicide Squad when you have like all these weird people just get together because he like assembles the KK Avengers. One person Duke puts into contact with Perdue is a man named Wolfgang Droiger. who is, believe it or not, ethnically German. But nationality-wise, he's Canadian. Now, Drüge is... His family were immigrants. German immigrants. Now think about it. It's 1979, and this dude is the son of 2 German immigrants who came relatively recently. What I'm trying to imply here is Drüge's parents are Nazis. Like actual Nazis from Germany during the war. In fact, a family friend... Do I have a picture of Wolfgang? I do. Here's Wolfgang. Looking about how you'd expect him to be. No monocle, no peaked cap, but he's about what you'd expect him to be. So Drüge's parents were family friends of a dude named Julius Streicher. Julius Streicher would eventually be tried and made guilty for being a war criminal in Nazi Germany during World War II. And Streicher was the person who created the newspaper called Der Stürmer, or The Stormer. It was a fiercely anti-Semitic, almost tabloid-esque newspaper that was state-funded by the German government, the Hitler government. Eventually, Streicher would be... Oh, the Daily Stürmer is actually the inspiration for the... Not the Daily... Der Stürmer is the inspiration for Andrew Anglin's Daily Stormer. But Julius Streicher will eventually be tried for war crimes. I'm not sure what he did. I think it was something involving Holocaust camps. But Streicher would be tried and guilty of war crimes. But that's sort of the family Wolfgang Drüge comes from. So Wolfgang Drüge's in there. He's going to eventually be the second in command of this operation. Drüge dropped out of high school just before he sort of became a white supremacist neo-Nazi. I believe that's how he self-describes. But don't quote me on that. So Perdue tells Drüge to find funds and resources for the invasion of Grenada. Another person who gets hired, who I don't have a picture of, is I think he's a KKK member, I'm not sure. A dude by the name of Don Andrews, who is a Croatian Canadian. Now, Don Andrews says, alright, if we're going to take over Grenada, we need to find a good place to do that, because I don't know if you noticed, but Grenada's pretty far from Florida. Streicher went on to found the Weapon X Project. Yeah, Julius Streicher sounds like a supervillain name. But, Don Andrews says, if we're going to invade Grenada, we need to take Dominica. Dominica is sort of like the stepping stone between the United States and Grenada. We should not invade and take Dominica, but use Dominica as the launching point of the invasion. Let's see. And another dude who gets hired is a dude named J.W. Kirkpatrick. He's a Memphis attorney. He never is publicly linked to them. I mentioned him now because he'll come up later. His whole thing, let me just tell you his whole character arc, and there's going to be spoilers. When the plan eventually gets found out, Kirkpatrick kills himself before he gets tried. So the only reason I'm referencing Kirkpatrick, he finances part of this, but he's only important in the fact that, he kills himself. Just because if I went through this whole lesson and didn't mention that a dude killed himself over this, then I would feel I didn't cover all my bases. Let's see. Now, the plan begins to fall apart, because Perdue's like, yo, Gary, we've assembled... we're starting to assemble this invasion. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get some troops. We've got our troops. We're going to meet over in Grenada. And thinking emoji, Gary's like, oh, I don't think about that. I don't know about that. He does a little thinking emoji thing. And he's like, here's the deal. I'll join your attack on Grenada after the KKK has taken out both the Grenadian army and occupied the Grenadian police station. And Perdue's like, yo, Gary, that's not what we agreed on, man. And Gary is like, sorry, that's my terms. Like, it's gonna be hard for us. You're essentially asking us to take the entire island by ourselves before you even lift a hand to do anything. Yeah, man. Screw this. I don't need you. Oh. So it was kind of like that. I would know. I was there. but Perdue's like, oh no. I've already got all this funding to invade a small Caribbean country. if I can't invade Grenada, I'm just gonna invade somewhere, man. So he's like, what's another place that I could invade? And wouldn't you know it? We're gonna do some rewinding back to 1970. Actually, to 1974. The Vietnam War is in its final stages, and Dominica is territory of the British Empire. But not for long. Actually, for 4 years. Let me check my timeline. Yeah, Dominica's part of the British Empire. In 1974, despite being part of the empire, Dominica has a prime minister named Edward Leblanc or LeBlanc. I don't know. It's a French name. I can't pronounce French names. LeBlanc. Hereafter, I will refer to him as LeBlanc. Will resign due to some protests on Dominica. For the love of me, I couldn't find why there were protests against him. And in his place comes this new prime minister named Patrick John. Now, Patrick John is a socialist. I think the problem was LeBlanc was too right. And then, socialists have a tendency to rebel. See Russia in 1917. See China in 1923. See Cuba in the 1950s. LeBlanc. I'm going to call him LeBlanc just to piss you off. I hate French names. But Patrick John, the socialist, gets put into power, and he's like, I'm a socialist! And then in 1978, the British Empire is, giving independence to various territories. Dominica gets independence, and I should be clear, we're talking about Dominica and not the Dominican Republic. Dominica's the small island. If you see in orange just underneath the world map, it says Caribbean, and then just go straight down from there. It's in orange. I almost didn't notice it because my mind just canceled out, got rid of all the orange stuff. But written in orange is Dominica. We're talking about that Dominica, the small island, and not the Dominican Republic, which is on the larger island bordering Haiti. But where did Patrick go? Patrick John becomes the first prime minister of an independent Dominica. Now, just 1 year later, in 1979, protest against Patrick John happened. I think because he was a little too socialist for the Dominican population. So, Patrick John eventually is forced to resign, and he will ultimately be succeeded by... Where is she? Eugenia Charles. LeBlanc, the French for LeBlanc. It looks like a gender-swapped Oprah, that's true. But after the socialist Patrick John is forced to resign, a more right-wing prime minister takes over of Dominica eventually, named Eugenia Charles. To put this into perspective, there's this wave of conservatism. LeBlanc is a black guy. No, that's Patrick John. Why the long face? LeBlanc might be a black guy, but I didn't look for a picture of him. The white, a black guy. Again, you're thinking of this is Patrick John, the dude who succeeded LeBlanc. We have three prime ministers. There's LeBlanc, who we don't have a picture of, who gets overthrown by the socialist. The socialist they put into power, Patrick John, and then he becomes the first prime minister of Dominica when it becomes independent. He gets overthrown because socialism bad, and eventually gets replaced by a conservative, Eugenia Charles, which is on the screen now. However, the demographics of Dominica is mostly black, so I wouldn't be surprised if LeBlanc's a black guy. Now, Eugenia Charles is sort of part of this conservative wave that happens around this time period, the same wave that produces Ronald Reagan in the United States and Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom. So we have a right-wing Eugenia Charles in charge of Dominica, a socialist Patrick John who's been ousted, and the KKK wants to support the socialist black guy because, Gary pulled out, so they want to invade somewhere, and hey, there's another country in the Caribbean that has a dude that was deposed. Let's ally ourselves with him to get him back in power. So let's see. So Purdue's like, yeah, sure, I'll work with this black socialist to overthrow this black conservative government in Dominica. And it's the same deal. He wants to establish an Aryan paradise on a corner of the island that he expects the government of that island to give to him after he's overthrown them and put in the new ruler. And at this point, and Don Andrews, the dude who suggested in the first place that they should use Dominica as a staging ground for an invasion of Grenada, pulls out when they realize that the plan, when he learns that the invasion is going to be in Dominica instead. Why? Because Don Andrew has like some corporate investment in Dominica. He's invested in the coffee industry, I believe, of Dominica. Who knows why? But yeah, now that he realizes that this invasion is going to be in Dominica, it's going to destabilize Dominica, he doesn't want his coffee investments out of whack. So he pulls out. A few people actually start pulling out around this time, because at this point they're like, Purdue, you just want to invade a country now just because. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of true. Grenada fails. I can start deleting stuff now. Purdue meets up with Patrick John of Dominica, and Patrick John's like, yeah, man, take over this island, put me back in power, I'll give you your own little Aryan paradise. Now, I referenced that actually, I'm not sure if I referenced, my head's kind of scatterbrained right now. Part of the Aryan paradise was going to have a business lucrative venture that Purdue wanted to do. Erica says the Dems created the KKK. Yes, but keep in mind that the Democrats were the conservatives at the time the KKK was made. The Republicans were very liberal in immediately post-Civil War America. The Democrats were heavily conservative. The Democrats were the main party of the South. It's very important to understand that. Parties switched around the time Franklin Roosevelt started doing his Franklin Roosevelt stuff. It's very interesting how the parties essentially just switch names. Let's see. So Patrick John actually already has a small army. He had some Dominican army loyalists who supported him when he was ousted. He fled to the United States, and he has some of what was called the Dominican Defense Force with him. So he's like, here's the deal, KKK. I was talking about the business. Here's the business that Purdue wanted to start up and running to get his little Aryan paradise off the ground. I have it somewhere. Brothels. Control F, brothel. Okay. You have to understand that. Where's the mafia? So, Druga, the German dude, will travel to Dominica in order to prepare, sort of like reconnaissance. He goes to Dominica, spends 2 weeks meeting with investors from Las Vegas who are connected to the mafia, and then he later goes and meets them in Las Vegas. So he meets the mafia in Las Vegas, and the mafia is like, here's how you're going to get your little Aryan paradise up and running, see? You gotta have 3 things. You gotta have casinos, you gotta have cocaine, and you gotta have brothels. And Druga's like, oh, okay. Ignoring that most of that goes against National Socialist doctrine. He's like, alright. This story has so many colorful characters. Yes, that's why I love this story. So the mafia steps in. They meet the KKK dude in Las Vegas. And it's like, if you want your Aryan paradise to succeed, brothels, cocaine, and casinos. And Druga's like, you got it. So that's the business they were going to set up in this Aryan paradise. Purdue and Patrick John formulate a plan that involves the KKK armed forces to rendezvous with Patrick John and his own makeshift army, that was what was left of the Dominican Defense Force. They would meet up on rubber boats before setting sail for Dominica and invading. Now we can get more into Purdue's sort of plan he's developing. We've already talked about the cocaine and brothels and casinos. 2 different Klansmen by the name of Arnie Poley and Roger Dermy pay $3,000, or they get paid. 2 KKK dudes get paid $3,000 from Purdue to visit Dominica for reconnaissance. German-Canadian neo-Nazi Martin K. Weike also provides financial gives financial backing to the plan. James White of Houston and L.E. Matthews of Jackson, Mississippi also provide funding. Now here's an interesting thing, because there is a possibility that there was also going to be an invasion of Barbados. Let me pull up the map again. Not Patrick John. There we go. Barbados is, if you see Dominica, go south, you'll see St. Lucia. Then south, you'll see Barbados. South Africa, which at this point is in the apartheid era. I'm not sure of the context between this and Nelson Mandela trying to push for the end of apartheid, but apartheid South Africa sees this plan for an Aryan masterpiece land, and South Africa's like, let's fund this. In fact, let's build up a little empire of Caribbean islands for white people. You ever watch my Europa Universalis 3 videos where I turn the Caribbean into this Jewish area? It's kind of like that. So he gets the South African government secretly gets this mercenary and weapons smuggler by the name of Sidney Burnett Aline. Sidney Burnett Aline's sort of this infamous weapons smuggler who's famous throughout the Caribbean. And Burnett Aline, I don't know how to pronounce it. But he's going to provide some funding and arms to the KKK for this mission to also invade Barbados. Let me read what I have written out here. There also might have been a plot to invade Barbados as well. It seems that Patrick John of Dominica had made contact with South Africa and had plans at Operation Red Dog. By the way, I can't believe I haven't said it. The plan to invade Dominica is called Operation Red Dog. It seems Patrick John of Dominica had made contact with South Africa and had plans that Operation Red Dog would also see KKK and Dominican mercenaries taking over the island of Barbados with the help of his contact, Barbadian weapons smuggler Sidney Burnett Aline. Burnett Aline has hinted, because Burnett Aline will eventually go free. He doesn't get in trouble for any of this. Operation Clifford, I was saying the same thing. Elaine is the only person involved in this besides David Duke. We'll get to that. The only person involved in this who pretty much goes free. And Burnett Elaine gets free because he ultimately doesn't do anything, because he pulls out. But in interviews later on, he'll hint that they were planning on a quote, large-scale industrial project on Barbados, with South African resources and millions of dollars available to Patrick. However, Burnett Elaine, being sort of this Barbadian nationalist, when he figures out that Patrick is giving land to the KKK, and he's not upset that he's giving land to the KKK, he's upset that they're giving land to Americans. He's like, you're giving away our land to foreigners. I'm not cool with that, so he pulls out. So eventually, South African resources, at least from Burnett Elaine's line, does not get put into it, and the invasion of Barbados never happens. It's very interesting. Let's see, another person who gets put as part of the plan is Charles Yanover. Now, Charles Yanover is an absolute madman. Throughout his history, he's going to places and just fighting people. He fights in different revolutions. He fights in South America. He fights in Central America. He fights in Africa. He fights in the Caribbean. He fights wherever he wants to. His hobby is just fighting people and just going, yeah. He's a proper mercenary, that one. So the Madland Charles Yanover, he loves the idea of, he learns about this idea of invading Dominica, and he's like, I love this. And he gives Purdue $10,000 as an advance. In return for he gives him this investment of $10,000, and in return, Yanover will eventually become a sort of a sanctioned figure for whatever Aryan government Purdue sets up. He will be this official who will have the legal rights to set up a gun-running operations to smuggle weapons into South Africa and Central America. So Yanover sees this, likes the idea, wants to be affiliated with this up-and-coming KKK government, and have permission and backing from the future KKK Dominican government to launch weapon smuggling operations in South Africa and Central America. So yeah, he's the mad lad. We've already talked about the mafia. Alright, so now here's the question. Where did the KKK get their army? Because we're talking about KKK armed forces. Where are they getting these people from? Let's put Purdue back up here because he looks funny. And for that, we're going to have to rewind to a man named Frank Camper, who I do not have a picture of, unfortunately. Now, Frank Camper is very interesting because I need you guys... This is the mystery that I want you guys to weigh in on once this is all over. The question is Frank Camper an FBI agent who has infiltrated the KKK, or is he a KKK agent who has infiltrated the FBI? That's the big question here. We'll talk about Frank Camper. Okay, Frank Camper, at this time, I don't know if I want to start with the school or with Frank Camper. We'll start with Frank Camper. Frank Camper first comes on with the first we know about Camper is that he was a veteran of the Vietnam War, and he's very upset about the Vietnam. Now, Camper is very much this very secret agent dude. We don't know how much we can trust about his backstory, but Camper, this is his backstory he has on paper. We don't know if it's the right backstory or not, but according to him, Camper was a Vietnam War veteran who came back to the United States after the Vietnam War was over, and he's very upset. He lost the Vietnam War, and he doesn't like sort of the social changes that are going on within the United States at the time. He goes to the FBI and says, hey, I can spy on the Black Liberation Front and the Communist Party in Alabama. So this goes into, is he FBI or KKK at heart? Because he wants to spy on these black groups. But at the same time, he's signing up for the FBI. So the FBI is like, sure, Camper, we'll let you spy on the Black Liberation Front and the Communist Party that's slowly growing in Alabama. And he's like, yay, I'm employed now. So he's also interesting because I think in his private notes, he's also expressed interest in, quote, destroying the anti-war movement with bombs. As in just going up to hippies and bombing them. Which is a very interesting concept, to say the least. So Camper eventually gets put in charge of creating this academy. Now, the KKK, again, as I said earlier, is more of a federation of organizations than it is a unified organization. Some KKK organizations believe that they need mercenary groups. Like I said, the ideology of the KKK from organization to organization varies wildly. Some people are like, we just sit at home and hate black people, and some are like, we get ready, death squads. So Frank Camper at some point joins some KKK organization and gets put in charge of this academy with the goal of creating... Frank Camper is the original Frank Castle, that's fair. He gets in charge of creating this academy for creating KKK mercenaries. Legally, the academy isn't part of the KKK, but that's just legally. Because legally, you can't own a mercenary school, I don't think, if you're the KKK. But for all intents and purposes, this is an academy under the control of the KKK. Frank Camper is in charge of this academy. He's gotten his boys, trained. Then one day, Mike Perdue walks up. And Mike Perdue's like, yo, Camper, I need an army to invade Dominica. Now, we don't really know what Camper's role is. If Camper is a member of the FBI, if he's devoted to the FBI and not the KKK, he would tell the FBI about this. We don't know if he tells the FBI about this or not. And you might say, but Radix, doesn't this operation fail in the end? Doesn't the FBI, arrest everyone? Surely someone had to leak it. The problem is there are about 2, maybe 3 leaks. This operation is not kept under wraps well enough. So we don't know if Camper told the FBI or not. But Camper gets told by Perdue that he plans on invading Dominica, and Camper's like, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm not going to join you. Sure, go talk to my students, but I'm not going to join you, personally. Frank Camper, by the way, will eventually be exposed as an FBI secret agent by the FBI accidentally. There's some Operation Camper's involved with, and then, the FBI does a public report, we've did this operation, thanks to the good scouting of Frank Camper. And then Frank Camper's like, how am I going to be a secret FBI spy if you just go and say, thanks to our spy, Frank Camper. So Frank Camper eventually gets out of a job by this point in time. But eventually he'll be out of a job. Well, that's what happens to Frank Camper. A few years later. So Perdue goes into Camper's academy. Here's how Perdue frames it. Perdue doesn't tell the KKK academy that was their way of letting them go. That is very much a theory. on if Camper was part of this KKK plot and what didn't tell the FBI about this, then they might have gotten rid of him through that method. On the other hand, government organizations seem to be bad at organizing stuff. So Perdue walks in. He doesn't say, "Hey guys, want to just do this random renegade action where we take over a country?" Here's what he says. Perdue walks in and he looks at the guy and is like, "I'm a Vietnam War veteran, and I have fought as a mercenary in both Nicaragua and Uruguay. I'm one of you guys. Trust me. I'm not gay." And he tells them that he has this Operation Red Dog, to invade and overthrow the government of Dominica. And he's like, "I have backing from the United States State Department as well as the CIA to launch this operation. I have members of the government like Senator Ron Paul." So he specifically calls out Ron Paul and says Ron Paul has said that he's sanctioning this operation. So Perdue's like, the State Department, the CIA, and Ron Paul are up for this. Are you guys up for this? Oh, and by the way, the idea... He says that the plan is to overthrow communism in Dominica. If you'll remember... Well, he tells them that the plan is to overthrow communism in Dominica, because there's anything KKK people hate, it's communism. And black people. But if you remember, they're trying to support the socialist Patrick John to overthrow the conservative Eugenia Charles. So they're not overthrowing communism at all. Not in the slightest. So he tells them, the government wants you guys on a secret mission to overthrow the Dominican government. Who's with me? And so a good bit of KKK mercenaries join Perdue. Now we go over to 1981. David Duke, over here, is like, "Oh, I'll get you guys a boat to meet up with John's forces." So he charters a boat. The person in charge, the captain of the boat, is a former Vietnam veteran. He also believes the same story Perdue told, that this is a secret mission that the government has told them to do to overthrow the communist Dominicans, who weren't communist whatsoever. He's a Vietnam War veteran. I think I already mentioned that. His name's Michael S. Howell. Perdue told him that the CIA wanted this. Okay, so sort of on the eve of the invasion, Perdue tells Howell that this is a CIA-backed organization. Howell's like, okay. And then he calls the federal government, specifically calls the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I don't know why he calls that organization, but he calls them and says, "Yo, I'm with this Perdue guy who's claiming that the government's backing this invasion of Dominica. Can you back me up on this?" And then the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms says, "No, we aren't planning a KKK takeover of Dominica. Are you crazy?" And so now this is the first leak. Well, potentially the first leak, potentially the second leak. Potentially Camper told the FBI. We're not sure on that. But the first confirmed leak is when the boat that David Duke hires calls the government. It's like, "Are you sure we're doing this?" And the government's like, "No, we ain't." And then, let's see. In February of 1981... Now, in February of 1981, the boat group backs out. So they have to hire a second boat. April 25th, Patrick John, the Dominican dude that they want to reinstate, he gets arrested. On April 25th, he gets arrested in Dominica because the Dominican government has been tipped off by the American government that they're planning to overthrow Eugenia Charles and replace her with Patrick John. So, oh man, I'm hungry. It's hard to focus, actually. Patrick John gets arrested. So, on April 25th, Perdue learns about this and is like, "Oh no, they know that we have a plan to overthrow Dominica." That's not Mike Perdue. There we go. But he decides to launch the invasion anyway. On April 27th is when the invasion is going to play out. Now, April 27th, where everything goes wrong. First off, there's this KKK dude named McQuitter, who was... That's not his name. McQuarter, though. McQuarter is a KKK dude who I had earlier in my notes, but then I deleted it because I felt it was irrelevant. But he's important at this point. McQuarter, he's a Canadian. He goes to this... He stars on this radio show. No, he calls into this radio show, CFTR Radio Toronto, and he tells them, hey guys, I know about this coup that's about to happen in Dominica. You wanna host me? So the person who's in charge of seeing who they want as guests on the radio show has this moral dilemma where it's like, one, we could get a lot of money by telling the story first as the invasion's happening with the person who's in on the operation. Or I could call the government and, like, stop an invasion that will cause the death of who knows how many people. Eventually, the radio host decides to call the government. And he says, yo, this is the second, possibly third leak, where this Canadian radio host calls the government and says, I have this dude saying that there's about to be an invasion because he has this big ego and wants to, like, be the first to report the story. Let's do something about that. So, April 27th, Purdue knows that there are leaks going on, but he decides to launch the invasion anyway. I'm just going to read this out. April 27th, Purdue assembles his invasion force, getting in their van to drive over to the boat for the invasion. Little does he know that 3 of the, quote, mercenaries in his group are actually undercover agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms who had snuck into his organization in between the Bureau finding out about the operation and now. By the way, we have boats. I don't know why it's over. Oh, the map is in the way. No, that's not what I want. This is a picture some Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms people took while they were, like, spying on the group. Here they are, like, checking out boats to try to find a person who will be willing to take them to Dominica. Very interesting spy photograph. By the way, the main background here is Dominica. You can kind of see the cars where the dude's just sort of sneaking around and taking pictures. A very eerie photograph, if I do say so. Purdue. Okay. Little does he know that three of the mercenaries in his group are actually undercover agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. By the time the van arrives at the marina in New Orleans, there are local police, FBI, and SWAT forces present to arrest them and search their boat and van. They discover over 30 automatic weapons, shotguns, rifles, handguns, dynamite, ammunition, a flag of the Confederate States of America, and a black and white rendition of the flag of Germany's National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, aka a Nazi flag. Now, I'm not sure... Radix is becoming delirious. I'm pretty sure I just read that, yeah. They discover over 30 automatic weapons, shotguns, rifles, handguns, dynamites, ammunition, a Confederate flag. And it says, every source I found says black and white Nazi flag. Here's the problem. Here's a photo of the room, of the photo of everything they found in the boat and van. I don't know if you see that flag in the corner, but that doesn't look black and white for me. Every text source, and even audio source, everyone says, although the audio sources are tertiary sources, but every primary source in text form say black and white. The color photograph I have right in front of you is in color. I don't know why everyone seems to say it was a black and white Nazi flag. I don't know why the KKK would have a black and white Nazi flag. It's clearly a red. It's clearly a color Nazi flag, as you can see right before you. By the way, I didn't know this storeroom picture or this or the picture of the boat existed until like a few hours ago. So everyone's arrested, yada yada yada. The media, maybe the red balance of the photo is turning it from gray to red, maybe. But also, it's a Nazi flag. That's the color Nazi flags tend to be. It's not turning the photos of Dominica on the wall red. It's not turning the weapons into red. The media reports on it soon after everyone's arrested. They call it the Bayou of Pigs. So let's talk. It sure looks like a Nazi flag to me. I would say so, yes. So now everyone's arrested. Let's do what happened to everyone. Okay, so Mike Perdue and 6 other men pleaded guilty to the Neutrality Act, which, by the way, if you didn't know, apparently around the time of the American Revolution, the American government created the Neutrality Act, which ruled that American citizens were not allowed to declare war on a country that the United States is not at war with. I thought it was common sense that a private citizen couldn't declare war on another country, but lo and behold, there's a law against it. So Mike Perdue and 6 other men plead guilty to the Neutrality Act. 2 others would be found guilty by jury, and all of these men will serve 3-year prison sentence. Meanwhile, Patrick John, the Dominican dude, Patrick John, he gets sentenced to 12 years in prison, but he only serves 5. After jail, he will go on to become an administrator for the Dominica national football team until he gets fired after taking some bribes from a Qatari candidate for the presidency of FIFA. Well, good thing they put that in writing. Yeah, really. So he leaves politics after this and becomes a football, aka soccer, coach before he leaves because of bribery over FIFA drama. David Duke gets called up, but he pleads the 5th countlessly, and they don't try him. He gets away free. To this day, David Duke denies being part of Operation Red Dog. Charles Yanover, the absolute madman, he gets 6 months in prison. But then after he gets free, he eventually gets arrested in the same year because he goes to the Philippines, I believe, where he meets up with North Korean spies, North Korean government officials, and the North Koreans... The president of South Korea is going to visit the Philippines at this time, and the North Koreans ask Yanover to assassinate the president of South Korea. And Yanover has this little crisis of conscience for a little bit, arguing like whether or not he should assassinate the president of South Korea or not. And eventually he says, no, I will not assassinate the president of South Korea because I might side with apartheid South Africa. I might side with the KKK and neo-Nazis, but it'll be a cold day when I deal with North Korea. So he goes to South Korea and says, yo, I just got hired by North Korea to assassinate your president. I'm just letting you know, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to tell you that there's this plot out there. So you can thank me. And then he gets arrested again. Now, McWhirter, the dude who spoke to the Canadian news thing, he was under the impression that he would never be charged for it because he thought that there was nothing linking to him. So he would openly brag about his involvement in Operation Red Dog until he eventually gets arrested in 1982. Don Black, one of the KKK members who were captured on April 27th, he would eventually be freed and would create the website known as Stormfront. Which, if you don't know Stormfront, it's a sort of forum for National Socialist and far-right people, for the most part. But the maker of Stormfront was involved in this. Now, Prime Minister Eugenia Charles. Let's go back to her. I love this Where Are They Now segment like the end of a movie. Yes. That's what I was thinking it was sort of like when I was writing this. Eugenia Charles. So she's the the conservative prime minister of Dominica. She finds out that the KKK tried to take over her country. She uses Operation Red Dog and its failure as an excuse to crack down on leftists in Dominica. A lot of leftists, socialist-leaning people, even center-left people, are beaten, tortured, and killed by the police of Dominica after Charles Eugenia sends the police after them to just beat the crap out of anyone with left-leaning political alignment. It's very interesting. The KKK failed, and so the leftists have to pay for it in Dominica. Now, because of Operation Red Dog, the United States decides that, hey, maybe the KKK would have taken over these countries if we hadn't figured out. So Ronald Reagan decides to better arm his Caribbean allies in the Caribbean. Where's the map? He gives funding to places like Barbados, Dominica, etc. Now, here's the thing. There's a conspiracy theory about Operation Red Dog that Mike Perdue wasn't lying when he said that he got backing from the government. Because there's this conspiracy theory that the government set up Operation Red Dog to fail. They gave Perdue permission to do this, but then pulled a aha moment at the end to stop them. To give the excuse that, hey, these Caribbean countries are weak, we need to give them more weapons. Because almost 2 years after they really arm up these Caribbean armies, these Caribbean islands, in 1983, the United States finally launches an invasion into Grenada. If you remember, this whole story begins with Grenada having a communist revolution and the United States not being happy about that. 1983, the United States invades Grenada to overthrow the communist New Deal movement. Donald Glover. They overthrow the New Deal movement, and they have allied support from Dominica, Barbados, and St. Vincent, who previously did not have a military, but because of Operation Red Dog and its failure, the United States armed them, and a year and a few months later, they're being used to invade Grenada. It's a very interesting conspiracy theory. I don't know how much I believe it, because personally, I would like to believe the KKK just did this out of their own volition. But yeah, very interesting that just so happens 1983 the United States invades Grenada to overthrow the communist New Deal movement. The newly armed Caribbean states like Dominica, Barbados, and St. Vincent participate in the invasion. Prime Minister Eugenia Charles herself is right beside President Ronald Reagan when he announces to the American public that there is an invasion of Grenada. Really makes you Eric Gary, doesn't it? Really makes you think an emoji. Now, I like to wrap this up with a quote from Druga. This dude, the neo-Nazi family friend of Julius Streicher. Druga has this to say about Operation Red Dog. He says about this in an interview. Oh, by the way, Mike Perdue gets assassinated not much longer after this. Like, he gets killed by someone, I believe. Unless I'm confusing him with George Rockwell. He gets killed leaving a convenience store. No, he gets killed at a laundromat? Where does he get killed? I'm looking this up. I don't want to do this. I don't want to look up stuff. But this is an interesting thing that I can't believe I forgot to mention. Mike Perdue. Nothing's popping up when I type in Mike Perdue. He gets assassinated very soon afterwards, I believe. Perdue. There's... Mike Perdue killed... This is taking too long to find. My face is tingling. I'm so hungry. I should have eaten something. Oh no, Perdue wasn't killed. Druga was killed. Dun, dun, dun! If I can... I was gonna do dun 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 in correspondence to this, but whatever. He was killed in he was killed in 2005, so never mind, it wasn't that long. Wolfgang Druga, a white supremacist who spent 3 years in prison for attempting to overthrow the government of Eugenia Charles in Dominica, was reportedly shot dead in a suburban Toronto apartment on April 14th, 2005. Okay, where was I? Oh, Druga's last quote to wrap this up. He has this to say about the operation. We had the men and the resources. It was just unfortunate that we got caught. But jail wasn't that bad. It really put American society and the racial issue into perspective. Plus, it gave me an opportunity to network with other racialist leaders, which really helped me after I got out. So at the end of the day, the only people who suffered are those who went to jail, except for Druga, because, jail was a good experience for him, apparently. And Eugenia Charles and other Caribbean states got a good day to beat up leftists. But if you're a KKK member, if you're a communist in Grenada, if you are any leftist in Dominica, your life sucks because of Operation Red Dog. But that wraps it up. That's any thoughts, feelings, concerns before we end this stream here today. It's like he never exists. That's true. Very good plot twist. Oh yeah, yes indeed. Clap, clap. Thank you. Thank you. I will probably do this because I thought this was going to go terribly, but it went pretty well. Camper. Frank Camper. What's your thoughts, chats? Is he KKK or is he FBI at heart? Is he a KKK member that is sneaking inside the FBI, or is he an FBI member that snuck inside the KKK? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It's one of history's great mysteries, as they say. Needs a movie adaptation to be... that's actually very... Yeah. I'm going to guess Camper is actually FBI. By the way, there's no wrong or right... Well, I guess there's a wrong or right answer, but nobody knows the wrong or right answer besides Camper, I guess. I think it really would do well with a movie adaptation. I can see them painting the KKK as a bunch of people in hoods, as one organization. KKK who... Oh, yeah, that should be... Yeah, KKK who infiltrates the FBI, who is sent to infiltrate the KKK by the FBI. Yeah, very interesting. I will say I don't think the KKK knew that Camper was in the FBI, but the FBI knew that Camper was in the KKK. Alright. I know Thursday at 8 o'clock doesn't work well, but, this stuff does get re-uploaded over on Radix repository. I might make this my standard time. I have a few topics I want to cover. Let me see. I did a poll over in Discord. Other topics I was interested in doing. I think the second... This one was elected, this topic. But I believe the second most popular one was Vietnam. Yes, the second most popular one was the time China invaded Vietnam immediately after the Americans left. The Sino-Vietnamese War. We might do that next week. Maybe. Although the other stuff also got votes. Some Japanese crap with samurai and ninja and betrayals, probably the story of Oda Nobunaga. And what is fascism? What is National Socialism? What's the difference? Yeah, those are interesting. It might be one of those, it might be a completely different subject, but I might keep this up. So, how long did that last? About an hour and 22 minutes, and I started streaming about there. Alright, that's a good time. So, without any further ado, thank you guys so much for coming out and listening. I really appreciate it. Any of you guys who are watching this on Radix Repository, thanks for watching. If you have any historical topic you'd have any interest in, feel free to let me know. I'm not good at ending videos/streams. The moral of the story here today is make sure you don't have a dude in your conspiracy plot that's just going to go to radio stations and tell people about it just before it happens. Thank you guys for coming out. Good stream. Actually, probably one of the best streams I had in a long while, relatively speaking. Freaking bye.